And 3, 2, 1.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are looking forward to presenting a lot of very relevant information for you. And before we get started, I wanted to give you just a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this session. We can make the recording available to anyone that lets us know after the fact. Also, the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to show just a few slides from, because we really want to focus on the software, will also be made available to everybody that has attended the meeting today. Everybody is in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into your GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar chat box there that you might see on the control panel, and we'll save some time at the end to answer those questions. This meeting is being sponsored by Ascenda, an mFiles partner, and I'm going to turn this over right now to Carolyn Watkins for her to do a short intro. Carolyn?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I have set up this session for today because I thought it was rather interesting and vital that we now learn as much as we can about how to be compliant in today's environment that looks so much to what needs to be done legally, what needs to be done from an auditing perspective, and just how to do a better job at a lower cost. So with that, we're going to get on with the presentation, and hopefully we'll have further dialogue going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. So what we're going to talk about today, just very quickly, we're going to give you a little bit of background on mFiles and who we are, and some information about what differentiates mFiles from other systems on the marketplace, just so that you have a little bit of foundation, and then we're going to go right into a live software demo. So mFiles is a global company. We have offices all around the world. We have a lot of industry analyst acceptance. We have a lot of credibility with not only Gartner and the Forrester Research Group, but Nucleus Research and a number of those types of industry analysts. And you can find that information available out on our website. But I wanted to just, and as I said, I'm going to make this PowerPoint presentation. We'll send it to all of you that registered for the meeting and have attended, so that you have everything that you can refer to. But I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about what differentiates mFiles from other solutions. So in today's world, if you don't have a document management solution, most people are storing their information in shared folder structures, or even paper copies in file cabinets, or most other document management solutions are all folder-based, which means you're managing your information by where it's stored. At mFiles, we manage everything by where it lives. So everything within mFiles is going to be categorized or classified or indexed, whatever term you might want to use, with some descriptive terms that we call metadata. So metadata is the foundation for mFiles. We are a metadata-driven architecture. Everything in our repository that we call the Vault is going to be classified with something that describes it. You can then use any of those terms to group documents and other objects together in relevant ways. We call those dynamic views. So there are no folders within mFiles. We have a very easy to use and user interface. These are things that the Gartner group found that the strengths for mFiles. We have a very strong permissions and access control process built in. We provide tools to do replication and archiving. Workflow is built in, which integrates automatically with Outlook and your email client, as well as assignments within the mFiles user interface that we call the mFiles client. You'll see all of this today when Chris Bradford, who's going to do the demo for you, comes on in just another minute. mFiles is also fully integrated with Windows Explorer and the Microsoft Office suite. So the Vault will look just like another drive to the system, and then there will be function buttons inside these 4 products where you can then have additional capabilities. We also offer both on-premise and cloud platforms for implementation, so whatever best fits your infrastructure is what we can use to help you maintain, security on your documents and provide you with workflow and compliance to help you with any regulatory issues that you might have. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time here kind of telling you about the foundation of M-Files. We're 100% metadata driven. There are no folders. Everything's classified with some descriptive properties about what that document or what that object is. An object could be a customer, could be a vendor, could be any other type of process that has descriptive terms. And so this is just the one slide really where I was going to spend a little bit of time. Now that you understand a little bit about what M-Files is and kind of how it works, I'm going to turn the controls over to Chris Bradford. Chris is one of our channel sales engineers, and he's going to take you through a software demo of our quality management solution.
All right, thanks, Dave. I will share out my screen and we'll get started. Okay, are you seeing my desktop okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so as David mentioned, M-Files is completely integrated into the Windows environment. And so what that means is it's actually built in as part of Windows Explorer. So if I just go into Computer, I will actually see M-Files showing up as an additional drive. So it's showing up as a virtual drive on my system, which means it's going to run within Windows Explorer and give me all of the features and capabilities that you find within Windows Explorer, like drag and drop, right-clicking, copy-paste, and so on, but also then having all of the M-Files features and functionality within that interface. So if I just double-click into my M drive here, it's going to show me all the vaults that I have on my system. A typical company is usually only going to have one vault, so I'm taking one extra step here to select the vault that I want to go into, but normally you would just only have one, and it would take you directly into the vault as you see here. So in the M-Files interface, what you see right here along the left-hand side are just some quick access options to bring you back to your home screen, which is what you're seeing right here. You'll have an Assigned to Me and a Checked Out to Me window and a view, which you see right down here at the bottom of the screen, and this actually acts as a dashboard. So it will either show up or not show up depending on whether you currently have something assigned or checked out to you. The assignments will typically happen as part of a workflow. So as you have any documents or other information moving through a business process and getting assigned into your queue, that's when you will see it show up in this particular section of the window. You can always jump to that just by clicking on Assigned to Me, and it will take you to a full view listing of that information. There's also a way to select favorites and recently accessed by me to quickly jump to content that you've used recently or that you frequently use, which all of these put together allow you quick access to the information without ever really having to search for it or go into our built-in views. But there are a couple of other capabilities as far as finding your information that are extremely powerful. One is the search bar, and we can type, this acts just like a Google search, so we can type in one or more search terms and have it find the information in the vault that's relevant based on those terms, and it will find it based on the metadata properties. So as we look at any individual document, over on the right-hand side we can see on the metadata tab the various properties and fields that have been populated with information. So it will search all of these fields, but it's also going to search the document content. And we can see previews of all of our documents over here on the right-hand side. So if I were to do a search for 0009, it would pull up this particular document because that is in the content. In this particular case, it also happens to be in the metadata, so it would find it either way. So all of the documents that go into the system are fully text searchable, provided that the OCR module is there as well, which most customers do opt for. So whether you're creating electronic documentation like your Word, Excel, PowerPoint files, etc., this will also hold true for anything that you scan in. So as you're scanning documents from an MFP, they can be imported into the interface and come in as fully text searchable documents. At that point, we can also put them into workflows and have them go through your typical business processes. So I want to start showing you kind of how the system works as we start to add documents in, and specifically around the compliance aspect, because with compliance, the processes are extremely important. It's important to know exactly who did what and when, and how the information flowed from one point to the next. So we want to see how all of that information comes together. I'm actually doing this in one of our vaults that's a QMS vault. That's our quality management system, and it's using all of the components of the compliance product built into a very specific vault for quality management. So this is just one implementation of the way that compliance could be used. Now, we've seen the compliance components used in the legal field, several other areas outside of just a typical quality management system, but particularly in legal, sometimes in accounting, HR. We have used it in HR environments. So any of those types of environments that lend themselves to strict processes and then being able to document exactly what happened in the past with these documents is an important way to show that implementation. So what I want to do is start creating a new document, and the first thing that it's going to ask us is what type of document we want to create. And being in the QMS environment, I'm going to create a controlled document, which would be a document that's walking through a major and minor versioning process, which means that we could have multiple drafts of that document, multiple reviews, prior to it being released as a version 1.0 document. And then we could go through the same process and have it go through multiple steps prior to it becoming a 1.1 or 1.2 or even a 2.0 document. So what I do at this point is just tell it that I want to use a particular template of a document. I could start with a completely blank document either way. And here we're going to create a document, and let's just call it webinar compliance. And in our document type, we'll specify, and we can modify any of these lists. So anything that you're seeing in M-Files is completely customizable, from the names of the properties and fields that you see to items in the drop-down list, certainly to the template. So nothing here is set in stone. It can all be modified for your particular implementation. So I'm going to choose that this is just a standard operating procedure document, and we'll see here that initially this is going to be full control for all internal users. So our permissions are extremely granular in the way that we can control this. So as it goes through the workflow and hits different points in the process, we can identify particular users or user roles that will have access to this document and the type of access that they'll have. So some might have read-only, others might have read-write access. You'll see that this is also going into a workflow, and at this point it's going to be the workflow that is controlling that permissions access as it walks through the entire process. So we're going to create this document to open it for editing, and this is going to bring up the template of the document that I can then make modifications to and then send the document through the workflow. So you'll notice right here that this particular template, which is just kind of a bare bones document, is showing a title up here, but right here we've got a major version, minor version, and language, all of which has been populated as metadata from M-Files. So all of this is part of the document creation on the M-Files side, and can then be included because we have a full integration with all of the Microsoft Office products, where you'll see a tab added to the ribbon, and in this case this was just inserting those M-Files properties into the document ahead of time. So that was just part of the template of the document. So here we could put any custom information this could be done through multiple drafts. So what I'm doing here is just creating the document and editing it. And now if I want to close it, and it will ask me if I want to save it, which is a typical behavior within Word, and then it will ask me if I want to check the document in. So in M-Files, it does maintain a typical check-in and check-out process to manage the internal version control. And before we jump back to that document that we just created, I'll show you on one of these that does have multiple versions. We can go into the history of the document and easily see all of the multiple versions of the files that exist. And we can open any one of these prior versions. We could also roll back to a prior version. And by the version, we're talking about the metadata as well as the file content. We will go back to that prior point in time. So this is really powerful in the interface of being able to control this type of information and have access to the prior versions so that we could roll back at any time or at least compare what was done at one time versus another. So I wanted to show you that right now before we start making changes to the document that we just created. The easiest way for me to get back to that document is that I can choose my recently accessed by me. And so up here at the top, if we reverse sort this, we'll see our webinar compliance document. Notice the calibrating centrifuge document right above it, we also recently accessed by going into the history of that document and looking at the prior versions. So this webinar compliance document, you'll see over on the right-hand side, as part of the workflow, it's now provided some additional metadata properties that we need to fill out. So we're going to put an effective date on it. We can establish a reviewer, a content approver, as well as an authorizer. Now, what this is doing is it is dynamically telling the document how it's going to move through this workflow. So any of this could be created statically, but with M-Files we have the ability to dynamically assign information on the fly so that we're able to determine on a one-off basis who we want to review, approve, and authorize this document. And this could be an individual, it could be multiple people, or it could be a group of people, depending on how it's assigned in the workflow definition. So at this point we have our draft document with all of the assignments created so that as it walks through it will assign it into these individuals' queues. So over on the left-hand side you'll see all of the various states that this document can go through in this workflow. So here you see that it's starting out in the draft state and all of these different options are available. Typically a user is only going to see maybe one or two options at a time, and those will be the ones that they have the rights to move the document through. I'm logged on as an administrator right now, so I'm actually able to see all of them, which is I want you to see all of the various options available. So what we're going to do right now is move this document into a waiting for review state. And when we do that and click OK, we'll see that in our view right here, it stayed where it is, but we can scroll down and see that the metadata has changed, that it's actually made an assignment to me. I'm the demo user that's logged on. It's giving me an assignment description, and now it's in that waiting for review state, which I could then pass it to the next one saying it's been reviewed and is now waiting for approval. This is also sending out email notifications. So if I go into my Outlook and check my email, we'll see that I do have a new assignment from the QMS Vault that's telling me that this particular document needs to be reviewed. It's giving me the document title and the information that's associated with it. So in this case, I could have just clicked the link directly from here. It takes me straight to the document in M-Files. So it's not necessary that you're monitoring M-Files at all times. Your email is going to let you know when that assignment appears, and then we can go straight to the document and continue moving it through the workflow. So I'm going to close this window. I just wanted to show you the email integration aspect of that. But now we're going to move it on to reviewed, waiting for approval, which is just me saying I have done that, and now I'm pushing it on to the person who will approve it. In this case, we made my user account serve all three of these roles, but you'll see that the assignment description did change. And if I were to go back to my home screen, we'll also see in the Assigned to Me view that that document has now appeared. So as I said, documents will appear here or not based on where those assignments stand. So at this point, I can mark this document for approval, and I can enter comments all along the way, but those are always optional. And this is where it's going to ask me for an electronic signature, and this is one of the key aspects of the compliance module is the electronic signature is going to take this information, include it, and attach it with the document. So all I need to do right here is provide my name and password, which will authorize it to go on through to the next state in the workflow. That allows, that's basically doing a double authentication where we know that the user who moved it through the workflow really is who they said they are, and that we don't have to, question whether someone impersonated that individual and moved it through the workflow on their behalf. But you'll notice underneath this document, if we expand, and this is another one of the unique features of M-Files, is the way we manage the documents with all of the other content that's associated. So underneath here, you'll notice that the electronic signature that I just applied has now been attached to the document as a related object. And in here, we can see all of the information about that, where it's showing who signed it, when they signed it, exactly what happened. And now as we move the document through the next state in the workflow, which is authorizing it to be released as a final copy, it's going to ask me one more time for my electronic signature. And when I click OK, we will then see that a second signature will appear as a related object. And actually, well, I have to go to a different view to see that, because this has now disappeared out of my Assigned to Me view. It's no longer assigned to me because I've completed everything that needed to happen. So to find it now, I'll jump into the Recently Accessed by Me, and you'll see underneath here that there are now two signatures applied, one for the approval and another one for the authorization, which we just completed. Now, typically, of course, this would probably be done by different users at different times, and so the metadata would look a little bit different, but you can see exactly what's going on with the document, who the reviewer, approver, and authorizer was, and realize that the document might have been modified during this process and could have looped back through the draft state, waiting for review before it's going through the approval and authorization. So the workflow itself can be customized, again, in any way that it needs to be, so that they are mapped directly to your particular processes. And in this case, finally, now that the document has been authorized, we want to release it. And when we click Release, this is really just moving it into another workflow state, but it's doing several different things. And I'm going to talk through this because it will take us probably 30 to 45 seconds for it to do what it's doing at the server level. What this is doing, the reason it's taking a little bit longer right now, is it's generating a PDF version of this Word document. But not only generating a PDF, it's also modifying that PDF to include a properties page at the beginning and a signatures page at the end. The signature page is going to include all of the digital signatures and digital font of the people who signed this electronically as it moved through the workflow. So you get the full record of that information as part of the document. It's also going to watermark the document to show that this document has now been released. And so I'm going to refresh my view and see if the document generation has finished. It has, and here's our finalized PDF. So I'll open this up and show you the items I was talking about, and then there will be one additional thing to show. So here you see a properties page that's been added to the front of the document, and this is just all of the metadata information about the document, what happened to it and when, so that particularly with a controlled document, you have all of that information available with the document itself to prove exactly what was going on. You'll see that the watermark was added that shows it's effective, and that's actually just taking it from the workflow state. Then we have the second page, which is the one that we started with, so it's just prepending this properties page, and then finally it's appended the digital signature page. So the person who approved it and the person who authorized the document to be finalized, it's showing the digital font of their signature as well as the date and time that they electronically signed it. And then one other thing is that it's embedding a digital certificate inside the document that shows that the document has not been modified since this digital signature certificate was applied. Now we can come down here and see the signature details. If we click on that, we'll find, let's see right here, to click on the details, we'll find who it was issued by, when it's valid from, and valid to. And the key thing about this is that we know that the document has not been modified, because if it had, it would have invalidated this digital certificate that's embedded. So that's a really key feature here, is that you can then send your documents outside the organization if you might need to send them to auditors or customers, vendors, to prove certain compliance aspects, and then you know that the documents that you provide are the true and correct copies to them and that no modifications were made. It's an insurance to them as well that they're looking at the valid copy of it. So if we go back to the mFiles interface, you'll notice that this particular copy, which was our Word copy, it's in the released release state right now, that we do have some other options for it. We could translate it into additional languages. We could retire the document if we just wanted to take it out of use. We could also create a new minor or major version of that document. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to version up this particular document. You will notice that internal versions were maintained like we saw in the other document we looked at earlier. So we do have all 7 versions of this document. That was not that we were changing the document contents itself, except back here on version 1 and 2, but just moving it through the workflow states and changing metadata. So if we were to version up that document from version 1.0 to the 1.1 or 1.2, we would start to see that it's going to go back through the workflow. So I want to pick one of these other documents by here that has also recently been accessed, and we'll find a finalized, sure, I've got another finalized document that's in a future version. Okay, so right here we'll see that we have a version 2.0 document that is now in progress. So the 1.0 document is still in its effective state that has been released, but the 2.0 document is now in progress, and so we will continue to see the Word document like this until we release it. And at that point, this will become a new PDF just like the first one was, and then this one, the initial PDF, will get changed into a superseded state. And the key to that is that the new document being in an effective state will show that watermark, but the older PDF will now show a superseded state. So if anyone opens the documents, there's no question about which one is the most recent version of that document, because you'll immediately see that it is effective or superseded. All right, so we want to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to go back to our home view, because a lot of the ways that this is used from this point forward is for training and auditing purposes and basically checking and verifying that what's supposed to be happening is in fact happening. And one of the ways that we can do that is to require training for employees on these documents that we're creating. The documents that we're doing may be, they could be safety documents, they could be HR procedures, they could be certification documents. You think about in a warehouse type environment, people have to be certified to operate certain equipment. So there's a lot of different ways that this might be used from a training situation. But what we can do is go in and we'll see right here our documents available for training. The one that we just did is now available for training because it's been released. What we want to do is come up here and create a new learning rule based on that particular document. So it's going to ask us to create, in this case we're going to create a document learning rule, and then we'll select which documents we actually need people to learn. So in that list we'll choose the one that we created. We want to enable this rule, and then we can assign it to our employees in some different ways. We could choose them as individual department members, which is just going to show us a list of employees. Now if we want this to apply to a lot of people, that would be a more time-consuming task. So we can also do it based on job role. So the job role may or may not be along department lines, because we might have people, for example, in project management that need to be aware of these procedures, but they actually work in accounting or sales. So we could have people across department lines that actually fulfill these particular job roles. And finally, we could also do it across geographic regions, which would be especially important if you were looking at various translations of the document. But once we choose this information for that document learning rule and check it in, I'm just going to create that. And then we'll see when we go underneath the objects that are related to that document, we'll now see that a learning rule has been created. And notice then that there were some training records created. Each one of these individuals right here, if we go down to the individual level, and notice we can just keep drilling down here to see related information. But just to pick one of these out, you'll see that that individual is in an IT job role. So that's why he was selected. That's why the other two were selected, is based on setting that learning rule for IT. Now this would actually create assignments for them so that, as you've already seen, it would show up in their assigned to me view. They would also get an email notification that they actually need to come complete this learning process. And this would be looked at as a self-learning process where they're just going to log in, read the document as the assignment tells them to, and then they can say that they have learned the contents of the document. So you'll see that these learning requirements or these training records are pending right now, but that individual could come in and move it to a valid state, which is saying that they have actually learned it. Now, because I'm logged in as an administrator and seeing other options, you see what else is available, that individual would only see that they could move it to a valid state, and they would be the only ones who could do that. Some of these others, not required, expired, never learned, those are the ones that it could be changed to automatically. For example, if we were to supersede this document with a version 2.0 prior to them ever learning 1.0, is that it could actually come back and mark this as never learned or not required, depending on how we wanted to term that, so that we can see that they didn't do that, but then they have a new learning requirement for version 2. And as we create additional versions, so if we did modify this one up to version 2 or 3, these learning requirements could be republished automatically to the individuals so that they are constantly being made aware of the new versions coming out, and that way we know that employees are constantly being kept updated on their current training requirements. that can also be true if we create new employees. So I know a lot of companies are handling this very manually these days. This is one of the areas where it touches across a lot of departments, whether it's HR or legal, as well as manufacturing, like we said, because HR may need to prove that everyone has been trained on certain procedures and processes, and it could become a legal issue if there were audits or lawsuits or anything like that where we needed to be able to see exactly who had done their job. So that's one way that we could complete this. Another thing that we could do is to come up here and create an actual training class. So if we were to create a training event, we could have multiple courses in here that we wanted to offer as a specific event. So here we'd put a start date, and let's say we want to offer that training today. And again, we'll select what documents should be learned. So in this case, if we create this, well, we know from this information that Alex Kramer and Jonathan Lockhart have not completed their training yet. So those are the individuals that we want to include in this, and I can select multiple people. So we will select Jonathan Lockhart and create and check this in. Well, now we'll see if we refresh our view, just to update the information coming in underneath here, that we now have a training class that's being offered on the 24th. That's the course. This is the document that should be learned, and these are the two individuals that will go to that class. Now, this particular class is also going through a workflow. As you see, it's currently scheduled and then can be completed. So the instructor of that class might be the only person who could come in and mark that complete just through the permission structure. But then we could be enforcing that the instructor is in fact certifying that these individuals attended that class. And we could have applied an electronic signature at that point as well, so that they would have to specify that information prior to moving it into that workflow state. So one of the last topics I want to cover before we open this up for questions is, essentially just to kind of walk you through where we've been. We've created the document, we've certified the document internally by walking it through the various processes, electronically signing it, digitally signing it, all of that, put it into the state where it was now available to be trained on. So we don't want to train on a draft document, of course, but once it's been finalized and is available for training, now we've created these training records. I was showing you a manual way of doing it if you ever needed to do it that way. It can also generate those automatically after creating the document and putting it into the effective state. But that's when the individuals will get their learning requirements. They can either go on and self-certify, read the document, and mark their learning requirement as validated, or we can offer the class. But in any case, we now have a complete picture of where our training stands. So if we were to go into our training view, for example, we have some built-in views here that shows document learning by employee. So if I were to pick Alex Kramer, we can see that Alex Kramer has the current learning requirement is still pending for that particular document. He actually had another one that is no longer required that was for a different document. If we go in and look at Jonathan Lockhart, we know that Jonathan Lockhart is in a similar situation of having that webinar compliance that's still pending. Now, if we look at John Stewart, he was the one that had his validated on his own. So we could go into different individuals, and of course they might have a lot of learning requirements. So if we pick one of these others, they could have several different ones and be able to see the state of each one of those to see, whether they had learned it, it wasn't required, it's still pending, or maybe it's overdue. That's very good information for auditors if you're needing to provide that information. We can also see, of course, these pending learning requirements where we can come in and see exactly what's been done and is still waiting. But any of that information is usable to prove that content. Now, just as a really quick run through, up here we do have the ability to create audits and manage this information. So with audits, this might be a customer audit, an internal audit, might be a management review. Any other types of audits that you might have could be added to this list or remove any that don't fit. Let's say that we just wanted to do an internal audit in this case, and we wanted to verify training process. You know, is the training process working given the way we are doing this? And let's say that we want to start it today and end it by tomorrow. We're just going to do a quick run through of exactly what's going on with our training processes. And we can assign a responsible person for this audit, which means it will be assigned to them. They'll get a notification that the audit's been created that they need to take responsibility for. And here you'll see that the audit itself is going into a workflow to be in an ongoing process, and then we can move it to a completed state. So M-Files deals with this object concept where we're able to track non-document information like the audits, the people, the signatures. So it's not just documents that we're looking at here or just documents that are going through these processes. Anything can actually go through a workflow, and here, so we're really just using this as a database to track information about what's going on in our environment, but then of course we have the ability to associate documents with this as it's relevant. So I have this audit created. Let's assume that I were to find that something was not going as it should be. So then I could come in here and create a deviation. Now, the deviations also have different types. It could be an audit finding. It might just be a quality deviation. I've had people where we added in customer feedback here. So it's a deviation but wasn't just necessarily generated from an audit itself. So here we want to say, you know, training not completed as necessary. And there is a related audit for this, so this is where we want to make our connections, and it's asking if the responsible person for the audit is also going to be the responsible person for this deviation, which I'm going to say they are. The deviation area is IT because that's what the document was related to in this case. And then we could assign a severity. I'm going to call it major because I think we need to make sure that people are being trained. The description of this finding is that, you know, we basically already said it in that short title, but training not completed. I think the root cause is that supervisors are not monitoring training requirements. And so if we create this deviation, you'll see that it's going into a workflow that the deviation has been recorded. We could then move that deviation through its workflow into a pending resolution state, and that's actually going to create an assignment at that point, because once it's now pending resolution, it's kind of out of the draft state. It's being assigned to that responsible person and telling them what to do, which could in this case mean that they're creating a CAPA task, and that can be, again, it can just be database information that we enter. So if we just enter a new CAPA object in here as an audit finding, and here we can say correct, let's just say correct training requirements. We're going to attach it to the related audit, which is the training process, and we will attach it to that related audit finding. And notice this is filtering the list for us to only show us audit findings that are related to that particular audit. And we want to make this due tomorrow because that's when our audit's supposed to be done. The recommended action is notify supervisors by email. So not only could we notify the individual that they need to complete the training requirement, but we could also notify the supervisor that they have employees that have training requirements due or maybe coming up overdue, and then the supervisor could follow up on that. So here we want to create new email notifications. And so that's going to be our proposed resolution to this problem. The CAPA has been recorded. We're going to move it into pending resolution, at which point we can now go create those email notifications. And not to get into that type of detail, but this can be set up directly from the mFiles client, and those notifications can be assigned out to particular recipients, whether that's individuals or groups of individuals. This could also instead be part of the workflow process so that it does it automatically right there. And finally, this CAPA that's pending resolution, we can mark it as resolved once we have created those email notifications. This is one of the cases where it's going to ask me for my e-signature to say that the CAPA has actually been completed. We do have this audit finding, the deviation itself, that we also want to move into a resolved state. And the system would actually not allow us to move it into this resolved state until the CAPA had been completed as well, so that it is checking all of that related information to make sure it's in the state that it should be before we finalize this. And then you'll also notice over here for the deviation as the last topic is that there's a pending impact analysis. Well, this can, about some time period in the future that you determine, it could switch into this pending impact analysis workflow state, which could create a new assignment back to the responsible person, basically say, we had this audit deviation 6 months ago, we created a CAPA for it, and we think we addressed the problem, but now we want to do an impact analysis and find out, did it really address the problem? So it's kind of a follow-up audit on this particular deviation. And you could create a new audit item if you wanted to and then relate the deviation itself, or just use this deviation going through the workflow and test that. Once you're satisfied with it, you might then move it all the way to the closed state. So we said that it went through its pending impact analysis. What we did to correct the problem really did work, and so now we can ultimately close it off. All right, so I want to stop here and open it up for questions. I'll point out really quickly this calendar over here to the right-hand side. You'll notice that the audit that we did is actually showing up on the calendar for today. Here we have a verified training process. This is actually showing up today and tomorrow because we put both of those dates on there. We also have the training class that we created a little while ago showing up on the calendar. So this would notify everyone as they log into the system exactly what's going on. We can expand and collapse these sections, and we can choose what types of information we want to show on the calendar. So all that's customizable as well. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dave and Caroline and open it up for questions.
Awesome. Great job, Chris. And there are a couple of questions that have come in from the group. So one of the questions had to do with access control. So, for example, if they have sensitive documents in the vault, like HR-related documents, does mFiles allow the different fields to be controlled or the document types to be controlled? How does that work?
Okay, yes, absolutely. With the documents themselves, if I just go back and select this document real quick, you'll notice that I didn't point this out as we went through it, but the permissions on the document were being changed as it went through the workflow state, and you'll see that this document is now locked. And if we look at that, that means in this case that it's read-only for all of these users. That's because we got this draft document all the way through to a release state. But the permissions can be modified either as a group like that, it can be part of the workflow process, It can be at the document class level. So just when we choose the document type that we're going to create, certain documents may be full control and others may be only for a department. So if they were documents, you could make it so that all of your HR documents are editable by the HR department but read only to the rest of the organization. Or you could tighten that down further by the metadata that you enter. Because with us being completely metadata driven, as you saw when I selected these particular users to route it for the workflow, we can also select users in here and have the permissions controlled by what we select. So there are a lot of options to do it at a very high level as well as very granular by using the metadata properties to turn on or turn off permissions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So there was another question that came in about connecting to outside data, third-party databases. Can you address that?
Sure, and we do connect to any database that is an ODBC database, such as SQL Server, Oracle, Access. We also connect to Firebird, which is one of the back-end databases for M-Files. So pretty much anything that you'll come across that is a standard database, we do have the ability to connect to. And a larger implementation across an organization, we are typically connecting to other databases like your CRM systems, HR systems, ERPs. That allows us to bring in, for example, your customer information, vendor information, products, employees, etc., and be able to tie that together. So what you see under here then with that metadata is that we're able to select employees from our drop-down list, or we might associate particular documents with customers, as you'll see that we have companies and contacts in here. So all of that information coming in from external databases just makes the assignment of the metadata that much easier.
Perfect. So we have another question that just came in. Chris, can you describe the differences in how security is managed between on-premises data versus cloud data?
Sure. Well, it's actually going to be the exact same implementation because M-Files works from a client perspective the exact same way, whether it is on-premise or in the cloud. Obviously, the server location is different, but the M-Files client is going to connect to that server in the same way. So in a cloud environment, you can still use the Windows client on your machine, and you just connect to it through typical networking protocols. And so all of the permission structure, it can be determined by groups of individuals. So we also do Active Directory integration. So if you have an Active Directory implementation and your users are in groups that make sense for the security, we can do that both on-premise and cloud. And so as we bring that information in, along with creating any local groups in M-Files or using that metadata as you see, the security is going to be driven on the documents accordingly.
Okay, and there's a follow-up question to that regarding the data connectivity between the cloud and versus on-premise in terms of the security of transit and security, of the data on the server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the data on the server is going to be encrypted at rest. We are also encrypting that traffic between the client and the server. So it's using an HTTPS protocol between the client and the server with the certificate at the server level. And then on the server itself, that information will be encrypted at rest on those drives.
Perfect. One last question that came in was related to mobile access. Can you access this vault or any of the M-Files data via a mobile device?
Sure. We actually have native apps for all three of the major platforms for iOS, Android, and a Windows phone. You can actually go to any of those stores and download the app for free. And when you have a vault to connect to, we can connect to that vault in the same way that we connect to it with the Windows client, just putting in server name, protocol. All of that traffic is encrypted as well because it will still be hitting an HTTPS website. And there's a ton of functionality in the apps with the ability to search and browse, look at your favorites, recently accessed. You can see your assignments in there. So everything, really everything that we were doing in here, you could have done from the mobile app. We can get our email assignments on our mobile device. We can click the link in that email. It will take us to the document in the vault on the app, and then we could move it through the workflow, including electronically signing it. The conversion of the document where we went from Word to PDF is done on the server side anyway, so we would ultimately then see that PDF created, and we could then go create the training objects, learning requirements, etc. So you're actually able to make additions, edits, deletes, and manage all of that information from the app directly.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Chris, and Carolyn, thank you so much as well. That's all the questions we have, and so we hope everybody enjoyed the webinar, and feel free to follow up with Carolyn and her team at Ascenda if you have any further information. If you'd like to schedule a live demo for you and your team, we'd be more than happy to do that. So everybody have a great day. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.